Hello, hello, hello. Namaste, everyone. Oh my gosh. You know what? We're going to fix the hair right quick. It's annoying me. I have been a busy witch this evening. So, yeah. I'm very tired, very achy, and ready to rant and rave. Because let me tell you what. This administration, very, very obviously, does not give a rat's flying fig about women or our veterans. I'll explain why. Oh my gosh. Ooh, ow. Oh gosh. Yeah, definitely achy today. All right, my friends. We're getting political again this week, and less about the LGBTQ community. We are going to talk about the SAVE Act and women, military personnel, dependents, and expats versus an executive order demanding proof of citizenship to vote. I don't know many expats. I don't know a whole lot of expats or military families that carry things like passports and birth certificates with them overseas. Typically, my experience as a military wife is military families, when they go overseas, they might take passports. Not always, because a lot of times your military ID, even a dependent ID, works. So they don't generally carry the stuff that proves they're American citizens. All right, so we're going to start today talking about the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or the SAVE Act, as it's being called, and the ramifications it holds for women. My POTS is kicking my ass, so I'm drinking Gatorade tonight. So, last week, with unanimous Republican support and 4 Democratic votes, let's hope the 4 of them get primaried, the House passed the SAVE Act. This bill would require voters to provide proof that they are American citizens, to register to vote, or to update their voter registration. So we now have to prove our citizenship to vote or to update our voter registrations. This proof has to come in the form of a birth certificate or a U.S. passport. This requirement could and probably will disenfranchise, and if you're unfamiliar with the word, that means deprive someone of a right or a privilege. This requirement could and probably will disenfranchise millions of voters here in the States. This is not the first time this act has been attempted either. The last time it passed in Congress and the Democratic-controlled Senate killed it. We don't have that luxury this time because both the House and the Senate are Republican-controlled. Its fans, however, are saying it is absolutely needed because we have to ensure that the only people allowed to vote are American citizens, while those opposed are pointing out that it's only going to make things harder for millions of Americans to vote. Sorry, didn't mean to yell in your ears there. Representative Nikema Williams, a Georgia Democrat, flat called it a, quote, modern-day poll tax, while former Secretary of State and former First Lady Hillary Clinton calls a spade, saying the SAVE Act is a, quote, Republican voter suppression measure. She's not wrong. If it becomes law, married women who changed their last names will be one of the largest groups of people impeded from being able to vote. If it passes, I myself, when I next have to update my own registration, I will have to provide not only my birth certificate, but my marriage license from my previous marriage and the divorce decree from that marriage that shows that I changed my name from my birth name to my former married name, and from my former married name to my current name. Because when I divorced the last time, I took back my maiden name, yes, but I changed my first and middle names. So my ID no longer shows the same name as my birth certificate. Thank you. No longer matches my birth certificate. My child, my darling child, will have to provide their court order showing their full name change. Because, oh wait, they may have changed their birth certificate, but still, trans people are going to be harmed by this because trans and non-binary people, a number of them have changed their names and, well, it doesn't match the birth certificate. Hell, my father-in-law. Representative Ilhan Omar, a Democratic rep from Minnesota, on Twitter said, quote, "This voter suppression bill will disenfranchise millions of voters, especially married women." Rep. Jennifer McClellan, a Virginia Democratic rep, told Women Rule after voting against this measure, quote, "It is a slap in the face for all of the women generally, and black women specifically, who gave blood, sweat, and tears for the right to vote." Do they care? No. Approximately 69 million American women and 4 million men have a birth certificate that does not match their current legal name. Representative McClellan says, so 20% of the voting population would either have to go to change their birth certificate or pay to get a new passport just to be able to register in a federal election. How forkin' ridiculous. I mean, seriously. You have to either get a new passport, which is not just a quick trip to the post office and voila, new passport. It costs anywhere from $140 to $236.46. I wish I had noted where I got that exact number from because it's such a specific number. But it costs anywhere from $140 to $240, say, to replace a passport, and then you get to wait up to 6 months or more to receive the new book. Or you go through the hassle of contacting the State Department of Vital Records for the state you were born in to try to amend your birth certificate to show your current name, which involves getting the court order to legally change your name, which is anywhere from $100 to $400, plus the fees of having a new birth certificate shipped, if the whole process doesn't require you presenting yourself in person for this process. If I had to present myself to the State Vital Records Department for the state I was born in, it would require a 4 to 6 hour drive. If my children did, it would take probably a couple of days. And we have just moved from one end of the coast that they were born on to the south end of the coast to the north end of the coast. I hate to think of what would happen if someone was born in Forkin, New York, or in Maine, and is now living in San Diego and has to present physically. So let's factor in the costs thereof, travel, physical and financial costs, into all of this as well, just to be able to vote. Just to be able to vote, which is something that is a constitutional right in this country. Shannon Lynch, the woman behind She Votes, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit, points out that young women are particularly concerned that this bill is going to prevent them from being able to visit the ballot box and cast their votes. She told Women Rule the SAVE Act has garnered more concern, more direct messages, probably since Roe v. Wade being overturned. So it's definitely on young women's radars. Sit with that for just a moment. This bill has drawn more attention from young women voters since Roe v. Wade was overturned. The White House, however, is doing what they do best, dismissing any concerns. Caroline Leavitt, the fascist Cheetos blonde beauty of a press secretary, had this to say about their concerns. The Democrats have been fear-mongering about this bill, have been saying if married women changed their name, they would not be able to vote. That is complete fallacy. I don't trust her, and I sure as shit don't believe her there. Lisa McClain, the Michigan Republican who co-sponsored this bill in a move that goes directly against her own best interests, claims, if you could afford to get married, they gave you what when you married? A marriage license. If you have a marriage license, you paid for it. You have a real ID. You paid for it. You have a birth certificate. You paid for it. Her response to the potential delay in receiving the documents disenfranchising legal Americans from voting during the wait time while they're waiting for their request to be processed was, you know when voting day is. Can you prepare for that? I would think one is smart enough to prepare for that. At some point in time, you have to take a little bit of responsibility too. Completely ignoring that there is already a 14 months long wait for those documents now. And the wait is only going to get longer when every person who has legally changed their name in the forking country is scrambling to acquire their forking documentation. She is convinced that the only reason Democrats are pushing back against this bill is efforts to do, quote, everything in their power to make sure that the 10 million illegals that they allowed into this country illegally can then also vote illegally. How many more fucking times? Oops. Forking times. Can she throw the word illegally into that sentence? Judy Chu, Democratic representative from California, also voted against the measure and said, I thought this was a democracy where everybody who is eligible should have the right to vote. If they are going to suppress certain parts of the population from being able to vote by increasing the number of barriers, then we can no longer define this as a democracy. I'm going to say that part again. Then we can no longer define this as a democracy. Multiple post-election reports from both 2016 and 2024 show that non-citizen voting is exceedingly rare. Representative Chu cited a Cato Institute study from 2020 finding that non-citizens don't vote illegally in any detectable numbers. Sounds like the food stamp fraud BS to me here. Ms. Lynch states, access to voting should not be a partisan issue, but the fact of the matter is we are seeing one side of the aisle pushing more and more voter restrictions than the other. I don't think that this is about preventing undocumented people from voting at all. It seems like it's really just an exercise to make voting harder for everyone. I think it was supposed to be an exercise. This echoes the thoughts I'm hearing from people around me who have been following this, that it is just an attempt to make voting harder, particularly for women and people of color. Ms. McClellan believes that some House Republicans are hoping the bill dies in the Senate, and she doesn't really think it's going to pass. In 2010, she helped kill a similar state-level bill in Virginia and says that this kind of legislation isn't new, but it's only now going national. McClain, on the other hand, the Republican who sponsored the bill, is confident that it will pass, though she does say, I highly doubt there will be bipartisan support on this one. Gee, I forkin' wonder why. Oh my God. Moving on. Now let's talk about the administration's obsession with voter fraud and how it is fucking over our military and their families. Oh, this is gonna be fun. All right. We're going to hop over to Military Times to talk about this one, as you can see from the screenshot. We have 3 organizations that have currently banded together to file a lawsuit on 31 March against a bunch of officials in the current administration. The organizations are the Secure Families Initiative, United Latin American Citizens, and Arizona Students Association. Similar cases have been filed by the League of Women Voters, Education Fund, the Democratic National Committee, and others. So, it's kind of obvious that this executive order and the new SAVE Act ain't exactly popular. So, the executive order in question imposes stricter voting requirements, thus calling into question the constitutionality of it because it could add barriers for military members and their dependents overseas, or even some in the U.S., who vote via absentee ballot. I know people who were stationed here in Washington who voted in their home state elections by absentee ballot. This will apply to them as well. Advocates are also saying there are other ongoing efforts at both state and congressional levels that undermine the ability of our servicemen and women, their families, and other overseas citizens, I will refer to them as expats, to vote absentee. Kind of like my LDS friends who have gone overseas for their missionary trips. Let's see, I've known a few expats, and they still voted here in the States. They just left the country. So what this executive order does is it shortens the receipt deadlines for absentee ballots and documentary proof of citizenship. Do you know how forkin' many military families carry proof of citizenship with them? I know we didn't. Logistically speaking, voting is already really forkin' hard for some military families because we move so goddamned often. And so often, especially overseas, when we PCS, permanent change of station, that's when you go from duty station A to duty station B, we don't even stay in the same forking country. You can go from Rota, Spain to Naples, Italy to Germany to Japan, and then hopefully maybe back to the States in round about a decade, because it's typical to move about every 2 years. And then, once you're back stateside, you get to spend about a year at least getting the mail catching to you from forkin' Rhoda. Now I get to find where I was in my script because we were just fighting over the mouse. Give me a second. There we go. All right, so you can go from Rota, Spain to Naples, Italy, which is a short hop, to Japan, to Germany, and then hopefully maybe back to the U.S. in round about a decade, because you move about every 2 years. And then once you're back stateside, you get to spend at least a year catching up with the mail that's coming from forkin' Rhoda 10 years ago. Because it has been chasing you from Rhoda to Naples to Japan to Germany and now back to the States. If you're lucky. According to Sarah Strider, a military wife overseas who is currently serving as the executive director of the Secure Families Initiative, the biggest effect on military voter participation is likely going to be the new ballot return deadline. The executive order that was issued 25 March requires those ballots to be received by election day. Previously, it was they had to be postmarked by election day. The fascist Cheeto is instructing the Attorney General to do something about states that count validly cast absentee or mail-in ballots lawfully cast by election day, but received after election day, according to the lawsuit, which was filed in the D.C. federal courts. For a guy who wants to give so many things back over to the states, he has got one hell of a feather up his nethers on this one, because the states and Congress determine election rules. But a majority of states allow their election officials to count absentee ballots from military and expats for a certain number of days post-election day, with 33 requiring absentee and mail-ins to be returned on or before Election Day, so says the National Conference of State Legislatures. This is in part because of mail delays. The requirement that the ballots be received by Election Day, quote, is going in the opposite direction of where we want it to go. We want a uniform across-the-board expansion of that timeline, says Ms. Strider. This order erases a state's ability to have ballots continue to arrive and be counted, she continues. We consider it a gold standard across all 50 states for absentee ballots to continue to arrive up to 7 days after Election Day and be counted, as long as they are postmarked by Election Day. The late arrival was the number one reason military ballots were rejected in the 2020 election. The Secure Families Initiative decided to join in on the lawsuit because of the concern for military voters here. Strider said, "We want to make it very clear we're not doing this because of partisan reasons. We are a highly mobile voter affected by delays and changing requirements, all of which are out of our control." She also noted that the effort is an extension of their ongoing work to advocate for military voters. This order, ironically named Preserving and Protecting the Integrity of American Elections, observes that federal law establishes... Okay, gonna take a drink. This incredibly ironically named order, named Preserving and Protecting the Integrity of American Elections, observes that federal law establishes a uniform election day for federal elections. The order states, "It is the policy of my administration to enforce those statutes and require that votes be cast and received by the election date established in law." The lawsuit challenging the order, among other things, requests the court provide a preliminary injunction and other action preventing the Justice Department from taking any steps that would prohibit the counting of absentee and mail-in ballots that are validly cast under state law. Ms. Strider points out that there is some confusion about some of the provisions of this order as they apply to U.S. citizens overseas and military voters. In one section, it appears to provide an exemption related to military and expats, but in other sections, it is not as clear, alleges the lawsuit. Whether voting from overseas or another U.S. location, military absentee voters have certain protections under current federal law. The Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, typically referred to as the UOVACA, I think is how they say it, applies to expatriates and military members and dependents who are living away from the place they are registered to vote. UOVACA requires that absentee ballots be transmitted to UOVACA voters no less than 45 days before a federal election, among other things. The narrow protection for UOVACA ballots provided by this order, to what extent that it still exists, might not even apply to some military and expats because a bunch of them don't use the UOVACA process to cast their ballots and wouldn't be protected by any carve-out, according to the suit. The federal postcard application, a method some military voters use to request their absentees, shows the voters UOCAVA. Oh my God. I am being dyslexic and reversing letters. The UOCAVA status. That said, a decent number of service members and their families don't use that method either, and therefore still wouldn't be protected. Also, this new, quote, documentary proof of United States citizenship requirement can and will create massive barriers, massive unnecessary barriers for military voters. Because of the incredibly narrow documentation parameters, those overseas may not have the documentation they need at hand, despite being clearly eligible to vote. My ex-husband didn't take his birth certificate to Naples, Italy, when he was stationed there. I mean, for flying fig, he barely took his clothes and a fork and laptop. Ms. Strider points out, states already have secure eligibility and verification processes. This idiotic executive order is just adding barriers to that. The executive order cites documents that can be used as proof of eligibility, and one of those is, quote, an official military identification card that indicates the applicant is a citizen of the United States. Current military IDs don't include that, and they sure as fluff didn't when I carried one, either as active duty or a dependent. Oh, wait, that's probably because for some bizarre-ass forkin' reason, you don't have to be a citizen of the United States to join the United States military. I had a shipmate who was being discharged while I was in, who was a Canadian citizen. And they knew he was a Canadian citizen when he enlisted. Anyway, something that is also not entirely clear is whether a birth certificate would be sufficient if eligibility proof needs to be produced every time a federal postcard application is requested, and whether said documentation would have to be provided in person. The order does, however, mandate that the DoD update the federal postcard application to require proof of citizenship, which it already does. Should this documentation requirement be put into effect, it would, quote, seriously undermine the ease of use of the FPCA, Federal Postcard, which many of these voters use to register or request ballots, and already includes a citizenship attestation, says Susan, and I am not going to try to butcher her last name, but she is president and CEO of the U.S. Vote Foundation. For example, she said, voters living abroad would have to find a way to make a copy of their passport and attach it to the federal postcard application. Sending personal ID documents around in post or online also carries with it a serious risk of identity theft. To our knowledge, to this date, there is not one single known case of actual Uokava fraud by a Uokava voter, she also said. And the government responds to the preliminary injunction by saying it is telling that none of the plaintiffs are individually named voters claiming they would be affected, and also argued that the organizations involved haven't named any voters they represent. Additionally, the plaintiffs couldn't point to any actions to implement the executive order that have caused harm. The plaintiffs, including the Military Family Organization, filed a response this past Wednesday, April 16th, noting they had learned the executive director of the Election Assistance Commission had written to the states to start implementing the executive order. So basically, if the organizations don't turn over names of voters that feel this order will negatively impact them, the government says they just don't exist. It's giving off picture it didn't happen vibes. Also, knowing the way this administration works, as soon as the administration has names, the lives of the people named are going to become incredibly miserable. The military member will at the very least never get another promotion, if they are even allowed to remain on active duty. I mean, come on! This forkin' administration has shown they are just a bunch of power-tripping middle school mean girl bullies. If they get a hold of names of people pushing back against them, those people are gonna pay hardcore. Because the fascist Cheeto Man is a forkin' bully who can't stand being told he's full of shit. And at this point, the man's so full of shit, I'm surprised his eyes aren't brown. Just saying. I just... I'm going to check the chat here, and what I'm seeing, I'm not liking. I see that. And it's a woman. Hey, Tammy. Hey, Tammy. As I said, me, myself, I have to update my voter registration soon. What this is going to entail for me, I have to take my birth certificate, my freaking wedding, my marriage certificate for a wedding that happened pushing 20 years ago. Might actually know where to lay my hands on that. My divorce decree from that wedding, because my first and middle names changed. They are no longer matching what's on my birth certificate. And then I have to provide my ID. And all of that. I've done it. It's going to be a pain in the ass, but I currently do not have a car. I have no money in my bank account, which means no way to pay somebody gas, an Uber or a Lyft to get to where I need to go to provide this information, much less even figuring out where the fluff I need to go. I have a feeling it's in downtown Forkin, Seattle, which, by the way, is a 45-minute drive on a good day. My children, if they need to provide their birth certificates or any of that, and we don't have it, they might have to drive or travel from Seattle to San Diego to provide that. Are you going to provide their travel funds? Because I can't afford to. I am thank you, 12. Way to fucking support your vets. I am an 80% service-connected disabled veteran. I am a former military wife, military brat, military sister. Ha! Yeah, I have the information at my forkin' fingertips, but that doesn't guarantee that I don't have to present my physical body to do this shit. So, how am I supposed to do it? So what about the people who are stationed overseas, who don't have their documents? That was the other half of what I was talking about. The expats and our military personnel who are overseas. They don't have it. How are they supposed to get it? That is the whole freaking point here. They are putting barriers in place for My ex-husband didn't take his fucking passport to Naples, Italy with him. He took a couple of changes of clothes and his laptop and his uniforms. That's it. And his military ID. He didn't have a passport at the time. I don't think he even has one now. Because he, other than on orders, has never traveled outside of the U.S. Oh, wait. He did as a senior in high school. He went to Puerto Vallarta for his senior trip. But not everybody has a passport. I don't have a passport anymore. My husband does not have a passport. My son does not have a passport. My munchkin doesn't have a passport. My munchkin is one who may very well have to travel to San Diego to get a replacement birth certificate because they would need to update the name on said birth certificate. So we don't travel outside the country. Hasn't been an interest or financially feasible. Military spouse doesn't need a passport to travel outside the country, or at least not when I was on active duty or at a dependent. My military ID got me anywhere I needed to go because I would hop a Space A flight to go wherever the fluff I needed to go. All I need to hop Space A is my ID. So, don't have a passport. I can't renew my passport because it's in the wrong name. Passport's in my birth name. That's a good point, 12. If you're military, then you know that your military ID works as a passport. With what money, my dear? She did. She asked if I wanted a reward for it. If you don't care, then why are you listening? To be a bitch? What branch of military are you? What's your branch? What's your rank? What's your rate? Or MOS? Nope. Might rage a little more. What's your MOS? Oh, gee, your father was Navy. You said you're military, bitch. My dad's rating. My fucking rating. My hat that says Navy veteran. Fucking proof that I'm a vet, bitch. Doesn't have a number on it to identify me. So she's another dependopotamus claiming her sponsor's rank and rate. Yep. Thank you, 12. Don't fuck with me, people. As soon as she said her father was the one that was actually military, nah, that's stolen valor. That's another freaking that's another forking dependent who's wearing that's another dependent wearing their sponsor's rate. Oh my God, my uncle actually did go to MIT. But I know. But technically I do have a genius level IQ, so what the hell? It's not something I brag about. I'd much rather brag about the fact that I was a Scadian. Which, oh wait. Anybody who knows the SCA knows that most people in the SCA are Mensa rejects. Yep. I remember that. Yeah. You're the best, 12. And this, my friends, is why I love my family and friends. I do not tolerate dependents who wear their sponsor's rank. Can't stand it. It's one of the fastest ways to piss me off. I did not wear my husband's rank. I would occasionally borrow my brother's when it was necessary, but on those occasions, I would just mention that he was, And that if they really wanted to fork with me, I would call him in. Because at the time, he would come in and protect little sister. No holds barred. I am from a military family. I am third generation military veteran. My grandparents, who it's my grandmother's birthday, so happy birthday, Grandma. My grandparents served during World War II. My grandfather's best friend is one of the most highly decorated submariners to come out of World War II. My father was a submariner in Vietnam. And the oldest of my brothers, who I don't generally mention, was a submariner in the mid-80s. My youngest brother tried to become a submariner, but we found out the hard way that he is claustrophobic, so he became a skimmer puke. And did that from 1990-ish until he cross-rated to Master-at-Arms in the early 2000s. He then retired in 2018. And then there's me. I put about a year in on active duty, but due to having been SA'd while on active duty, I got the boot. I was pre-tailhook. And I have had 3 husbands who were all the same rate in the Navy. You don't fuck with me when it comes to being a military veteran or dependent. I know the rules inside out, upside down, and backwards. And with that, my darling dear friends, I am going to call it a night. And I'm going to say, spread love, spread joy, spread kindness. Spread love, spread joy, spread kindness. Tell your loved ones you love them. You don't know when that last opportunity will be. And remember, you are loved, you are wanted, in more ways than one. You are needed, and you genuinely do have a purpose in this life, even if it's just to be a target. I'll see y'all later.